whether you believe all of these encounters are, real. Well, because what most people do with the subject of aliens is they just, that's a thing over there for crazy people to deal with and write books about and deal with on their own time. But I don't have time for that. So you kind of avert your eyes because you don't know what to do with it. You don't know what to do with the anomalous. There's an anecdote online about Jimmy Carter that's been floating around for a long time, and it appears in different forms. I don't know how factual it is, but it has to do with his presidency, and apparently at some point during his presidency, Jimmy Carter was briefed on the classified information that the intelligence agencies had on the subject of UFOs. And after that briefing, he was seen crying and was, in some versions of the story, inconsolable for days and even weeks. And regardless of how true that story is or where it comes from or whether it was just made up entirely, it kind of contains in a nutshell the core of the phenomenon of aliens. And in this course, we're going to discuss the philosophy of the aliens. This is not a variety of different philosophies as held by different outer space creatures, nor is it philosophy of the feeling of alienation or anything like that. Although it'll touch on those kinds of subjects later on. This course is about a philosophical analysis of the phenomenon of UFO sightings and alien abductions and all of the variety of closer encounters. And if that seems strange to you, well then, very good. You're right. So we're going to look at a number of reported incidents and the ramifications of those incidents on the individuals and society at large, I guess. We're going to talk about particular incidents, but we're not necessarily engaging with all of the different stories trying to come to some conclusion about the facts of what was experienced versus what might be distorted or made up or hallucinated. This isn't like a journalistic kind of attempt to discover what the truth is in that way, but what we're looking at, since this is a philosophy course, is a deeper kind of truth, a kind of capital T truth. And my thesis throughout this course is that this subject and all of the strangeness, the deception, the paradoxes and contradictions and mystery held within it do point to a capital T truth that is not just relevant to the subject of philosophy, but central to it. So yeah, if you have any familiarity with the subject of aliens as it has appeared in pop culture or conspiracy type thinking or curiosity that the subject has engendered, and you don't have to have any familiarity with this stuff going into the course, but I would imagine that for most of you there probably is some interest that made you want to pick the course up in the first place. But regardless of that, I'll just tell you, for those of you who don't know, that at its core, the phenomenon is very strange and mysterious, of course, and it has spawned 1,000 different theories about what the truth actually is, what it is that's being covered up, what it is that's not being told, why this stuff is happening, why it's happening to, and how we can take all of these different stories from across time and space and weave them into a single kind of theory. And I would say, as of now, the core truth is that you can't weave it into a single theory of what aliens actually are. If you do engage in speculation and theories of the world, all of the literature of UFOs and the online discourse, you'll find very quickly that, like I said, there's 1,000 different theories on what it is, and you'll find proponents of those theories who believe them and pursue them with great vigor, and who really believe in them. And that in and of itself is maybe something that we need to be looking at. What kind of phenomenon could spawn this kind of curiosity? Isn't the right word. It's fascination isn't quite it either. It's obsession, but not obsession in a single unified direction, but it just goes outward in 1,000 different directions. And ultimately what we're looking at here is, within philosophy, there's a sub-discipline area of study called ontology, which is literally the study of being. Which, if you're not familiar with ontology, it is a pretty meta kind of discourse. In fact, you could not think of anything to study that is more meta. It's like asking the question, what is God? But it doesn't formulate it that way. For philosophy, the discipline of ontology is the study of being. And if you just sit with that for a minute and think to yourself, the study of being, well, what is that? What is being? It's everything, right? It's all of not just reality, but reality and whatever contains reality. So how do you study something like that? What does that even mean? Can you study something like that? Sure. But could you ever locate capital T truth about what is being? It's an interesting question. But the reason that I led off with the anecdote about Jimmy Carter being destabilized is because that anecdote, but the point is to think of the avatar of leadership, maybe the wisest person you know, and you probably don't necessarily think that that's the United States president, but that's theoretically the role of the president or the leader or the king, is to be the wisest person around. And what kind of truth could that person come into contact with them with that would shake them so badly? If you come into contact with something that redefines your ontology or causes you to come to an understanding of reality, the world, the universe, being, however you formulate it, it causes your understanding to be changed or disrupted in such severe a way. Well, how could you handle that? How does that change you? How does that change your vision for the country or for the future or for your family? So at its core in this course, what we're going to be bumping into in all kinds of different ways, mostly theoretical, but not entirely theoretical, is a kind of ontological provocation, which simply means something that disrupts or provokes or challenges your held and possibly unexamined ideas about what all of this is. What world were you born into? Because in a way, we all have the experience of having been born into a world that is full of mystery, that is unknown to us, that we must learn our way through with the teachers that are provided to us. And so maybe the closest you could come to understanding what an ontological provocation is to think about whether or not you believe in God, or whether you have in your life had the experience of changing whether you believe in God or not. Or if you haven't, just imagine how that might affect a person. Or probably you have encountered people who have had similar such experiences where to believe in a God or not is a central thing. And so if you have that belief inserted into your life or taken out of your life suddenly, it either leaves a vacuum or displaces every other idea that you have about what reality is. And so one of the things that I want to stress to you before we get too further into it is that when a person is ontologically provoked in a serious way, if they take these kinds of questions seriously, it can be very destabilizing to the individual. It has caused a great number of people to become destabilized, become kind of disintegrated in terms of who they are, and how they think of themselves and how they think of the world. And so it is very much a dangerous thing. That is one thing that sets this course apart from any of the other courses you're likely taking right now. And so, because we're dealing with such high level, or however you want to think about it, maybe low level, fundamental, grounding subjects, I'm going to ask some things of you that are like homework, but a lot different from the kind of homework you're used to getting. And for one, we just spoke about God as a ontological provocation. And that's something that we're actually going to be exploring. That's a good way to kind of practice or prepare yourself for what it might mean to have your ontology shifted. And so for this first week, before we get any further into the course, I will be asking you to adopt, so that if you believe in God, what I want you to do, if you have the propositional belief that I believe in God, what I want you to do is to write an essay. And I'm not going to grade this thing on grammar or coherence, even, really. I guess to some extent coherence, but you either understand the assignment or you don't. I want you to explain to me what God is and what it means to believe in God, and what if anything, has challenged that belief for you. But mostly, I want it to be about what it means to believe in God. So what is God to you? What does God mean? What is that? What is that thing? What is that word pointing at? And also, what is belief? What does it mean for a person to believe in something? And if you don't believe in God, you have a different assignment, which is to pretend or practice believing in God. And you can formulate however you want. You can do the kind of AA thing where in AA, when people begin attending, they are asked to take up belief in a higher power. So I'm not asking you to adopt a particular spiritual tradition or any concept of God that someone else gives to you, but simply to practice. And I'll have you do a 1-page essay as well. But again, I don't really care about the quality of the writing. I want you to sit for maybe 5 or 10 minutes a day and pretend that you believe in God. And if it doesn't make sense, good. That means you need more practice. And again, I'm not asking you to adopt a propositional belief. I'm not asking you to change your belief structure or your understanding of reality with this. This is an exercise in ontology. But rather than just discussing the concepts on paper, none of that really means anything if you're not able to grasp or adhere to or participate in an understanding of what it would mean to believe something very different about reality than what you believe. So that's your homework for week 1 before we get into the rest of the syllabus here. And the other thing is that I'm going to have to ask for the 7 weeks that you're here with me that you take good care of yourself, your body. You get rest, you eat well, maybe a little better than you're used to, maybe get a little more exercise than you're used to. And I know this is asking a lot, but I'm offering you a lot with this course. I'm putting a lot on the line here. I'm offering to challenge you in ways that you will not be challenged anywhere else, that you have never been challenged before. And if you don't want to do it, that's perfectly fine. In fact, in the back, we have on that table, there's all kinds of paperwork. You can, if you want to drop the class, just fill out one of those papers and you can just leave it on the table or bring it up to me so they don't get lost or someone doesn't pick it up. But if you drop this class, it doesn't count as a drop. You get an A. That's for the first 2 weeks only. You understand what I mean by that? If you decide not to continue with this class, it does not count as a drop. You get all of the credits and you get an A. But if you decide to proceed, the highest grade that you can get is a B. Okay, so what we're going to look at now is a variety. In fact, I tried to put together an exhaustive kind of categorization of the different theories that exist about aliens. So I'm relying a lot on this book, which is on your syllabus, Closer Encounters by Jason Reza Georgiani, especially for this first set of hypotheses here. There's a little bit of reading for that, just the preface this week. So these are, in a nutshell, we're kind of starting at the end in a way here. So for those of you who have familiarity with the subject of aliens, you'll find some things that you know about here, or you've heard of, or maybe you even believe in. And for those of you who don't, then buckle up. You can just think of this as kind of an exercise in science fiction, though, for now. I'm just introducing to you all of the theories that people have developed and cultivated, and how they might be categorized and what they might point to if we take them all together. And these come from the many, many, many encounters that people have had and have reported over the years of their interactions with the phenomenon. So aliens or UFOs, or to some degree even like near-death experiences and parapsychological studies. So right here, I've already pointed out that there's a lot of deception and cover-up within the subject of UFOs. And if you understand what I was saying about ontological shock, when we'll get there later, that is some of the reason why there's so much deception, but that's not the only reason. There's a lot of, well, let's just look at the theories. So number one here, we have the extraterrestrial. This is kind of the classic alien idea that these are creatures that have come in spaceships from faraway planets. I'm assuming everyone is probably familiar to some degree with this formulation. It's more or less the entry-level understanding, whether that's like an intentional thing or not. But there's a lot of other ideas about what aliens could be. So we have extraterrestrials, outer space aliens. Second, we have the breakaway civilization. And what that means is that in our human history, sometime in the past, perhaps a long, long time ago, perhaps tens of thousands of years ago, perhaps very recently, that a group of humans made some kind of probably technological discovery that gave them a different relationship to the world. And instead of sharing that with the public, they decided that it would be best to keep it to themselves and to push their own advantage with these technologies. And you can think about all kinds of reasons why a people might do that. They might choose to do that. They might choose to keep themselves separate from society at large and form a breakaway civilization with a divergent evolutionary pathway, a divergent future from the rest of us. So this would be that, for example, a group was able to develop technologies such as maybe flying saucers, and now they have their own civilization. Maybe it's embedded within ours, or maybe it's in a secret location underground or in outer space or under the water. And every once in a while there are these contact points where their civilization is either kind of scouting out ours or studying us, or maybe just by accident there is this kind of encounter between the two. So for right now, we're just going to think of these as if they were scientific or science fiction ideas. Think of this as how many? 1, 2, 3, 7. Think of this as being like 7 different science fiction books about what aliens could be. Extraterrestrials, breakaway civilization. Third, we have the interdimensional or parallel reality idea of that there being parallel tracks of reality or different dimensions that we can't see, and that the aliens are beings that exist in other dimensions that occasionally come into contact with ours. They occasionally break the dimensional barrier, whatever that is, and suddenly they're in our dimension, or maybe we're going to theirs. So that could spawn all kinds of different ideas about what that means for there to be different dimensions or parallel realities. Who knows? Next, and a little bit overlapping, is the idea of time traveling, that these could be humans from the past or from the future who are using some kind of technology to move not through outer space, but merely through time. And that way they are coming into contact. We are experience something from without suddenly being in our reality as a result of time travel. Next, we have the secret ancients, and this is similar but not exactly the same as the breakaway civilization. The idea that maybe ancient humans a long time ago, we're talking probably at least 6,000, maybe 10,000, maybe 100,000 years ago, a group of humans would have, like in the breakaway hypothesis, they would have gone underground or gone underwater or gone to outer space or gone to another dimension. Who knows? The idea is it's human beings from a different evolutionary timeline that have hidden themselves away from us, but again are coming into contact with us here and there. Next, unconscious projection. This one is quite different, but it's quite interesting. So the idea with unconscious projection would be that the aliens are not, where are we at? Dang. The aliens are not physical beings like other humans or animals, but they are products of the collective unconscious, as the psychologist Carl Jung would have formulated it. This idea is that our minds, when we're born, they have things in common, which are like the archetypes or like God's kind of different archetypal unconscious symbols that interact with our consciousness. And that out of the shared consciousness that we have, there are things that are not obvious, things that are not apparent to us, things that are unconscious. Because, there's always a lot going on in your body and in your mind that you're not aware of in a given moment. So the very structure of your mind, in fact, is mostly unknown to us. We have dreams in which we encounter very strange things. And the weird thing about it is that in these, we have like, if you read other people's dreams, read accounts of other people's dreams, you'll find that they might have a lot in common with your own dreams, or at least there are shared commonalities in the kind of language of dreams. I guess that is to say that we kind of dream about the same things. And not just, some of these are kind of obvious things like fears or desires, but there's some very strange commonalities of dreams that people have. And we'll get into what some of those maybe are later on in the course. And then finally, we have, for our seventh hypothesis, the simulation programmer hypothesis, which is that you're probably familiar with simulation theory, the idea that our world is a computer simulation and we're just Sims or NPCs or PCs maybe. The world is a simulation and aliens are the programmers coming in with their cheat codes, and that's why they appear to have all the powerful alien technologies and abilities that they have. All right, so that's a lot. But we're not done yet. We're only halfway done. So, considering all of the deception and cover-up involved with the phenomenon, you have to consider not just the hypotheses of what these things could be, but also the reason why they would appear to us and then be hidden. What's up with the cover-up? We have this idea that the government knows all kinds of things about aliens, and then some of that information is occasionally leaked to us. But not only, I mean, for most people, when they hear that, they think, what is it that the government knows? And that's one good question. But the other question, going back to the Jimmy Carter anecdote, is why the secrecy? Why are they hiding this? There must be some reason. Is it maybe have to do with the ontological provocation? If learning the truth, as it was demonstrated to him, was so disruptive to Jimmy Carter, perhaps it was equally disruptive to others. Perhaps the idea is that the truth is so horrifying, so shocking, that people just can't take it. And that is going to come up a lot more in this course. That's the second one here, the Hyde ontology order. What that means is they are hiding the truth about the truth that the alien phenomenon reveals to us about reality for the sake of maintaining social order. So perhaps if the truth was revealed, there would be panic or chaos or simply unknown. So much. It would be so disruptive that we don't know what would happen. Just to offer you a clue as to where this course is headed, I think that is really kind of the point, in a way. And we're going to get to it later. This is, maybe you can see now why it would be important to learn to shift ontologically your frame about what reality is, and to get comfortable with the idea that maybe the things that you know are true, the things that you've never even really questioned before, might not be quite true in the way that you think that they are. And again, there's nothing. I'm not trying to scare you. If you stick with me for the 7 weeks and you do your exercises, I can promise you that I'm not leading you into some kind of bottomless chaos of deception. And I'm also not giving you a perfectly factual, true theory about what aliens are. But by looking at the nature of ontology and how it informs everything we see about the world, that's the reason that this is a philosophy course. That's the reason that we're studying aliens from a philosophical perspective. And my core thesis that I don't want to get too into right now is that this is really the lens that the phenomenon ought to be looked at through. So I've pointed out how disruptive it can be. Well, we'll get to that in a second, but you don't need to be afraid. Let's run through these real quick. Hyde advanced technology. So we have alien crashes and the government retrieves the flying saucer and whatever's in the saucer, and they're able to reverse engineer the technology. And now we have, you can name it, you can look it up, what possible technologies might exist. And maybe they've existed for a long time and they've been hidden. And why would they be hidden? To protect the economy from a crash, because there's now free energy, or you can travel at light speed, or you can time travel. Obviously, if you discover a technology that allows you to time travel, you can't publicize that so that anyone can do it, because if anyone can time travel, well, who among us has the wisdom to time travel without disrupting things, without distorting the timeline and possibly dooming all of us? Hyde ontology, we went through that one, but possibly the other reason that the ontology could be hidden from us the truth about reality as revealed by the so-called aliens would be not to protect the public from a kind of state of panic in order to maintain order, but to keep the public in the dark as a kind of controllable chaos. To keep people from understanding the truth so that the government or the intelligence agencies or whoever else actually has a more powerful grip on us. That's another interesting way of looking at it. Maybe the truth leads to chaos, but maybe the truth sets us free. They don't want us to be free because, well, there's all kinds of reasons that you could imagine. Next, disguise operations. So maybe you're familiar, maybe you're not, with secret government programs that have been declassified or uncovered that maybe don't paint our government in the best light. Maybe experiments were carried out that were highly unethical. Maybe they're still being carried out. And so, in order to disguise these secret programs, they could be inventing a kind of mythology of aliens and flying saucers so that when they carry out their experiments, maybe that's what the abductions are. If you haven't heard of the MK Ultra government program that was partially declassified, but there's a lot of that has been written about it that was not directly declassified from the government. But I'm not going to get into it too much now, but it would be an interesting thing for you to look up if you haven't heard of it before. It's the idea that the government has been experimenting on its own people in ways that are very disturbing and would very much require some kind of elaborate cover-up. And so maybe that's where all of this comes from. Maybe there's drugging people and hypnotizing them such that they remember things that are different from what actually happened. And then the next two have to do with international relations. So if you think back in particular to perhaps the Cold War, the idea that it might be important for the United States to project a strength that is greater than maybe reality, greater than the reality, to kind of demoralize the USSR or to make them fear us. But that could be in the context of any kind of international thing where it might become important for an authority, a government, to keep both other nations and maybe its own people in a state of a delusion about just how strong and powerful that the authority is. And then besides projecting strength, there could be, and this is something we're going to come up against a lot, is the idea of obfuscation, the idea that stories or accounts or incidents might be seeded into the public consciousness. Stories could be put out there that are just entirely fake as a means to confuse people so that they don't come to an understanding of what is true. So all of these could they're not necessarily separate hypotheses. They all could be intermingled in all kinds of different ways. There's lots of overlap potential. So you have, whether you know it or not, whether you've ever thought about it or not, you have a theory of reality that you operate under. You have a theory of who you are, and you have a theory of what the world is. And both of those things have a narrative structure. They are stories. Everything that you the way that you understand yourself is just a series of stories about your past, about your future. You know, your thoughts about yourself are constantly reinforcing the story you have of why you used to be the way you used to be and why you are the way you are now, and maybe what you are doing in the future and why you're pursuing the future that you're pursuing. All of that is at its core a narrative. It's a story. And we wouldn't say that stories aren't real, but clearly they aren't, they aren't capital T truth. Stories are conceptual, kind of linear frameworks of understanding what is and what has been, right? I'm maybe saying something simple in a complicated way right now. I'm not saying anything particularly complicated. Everything is, in a way, a story. In particular, who you think you are. We're way out of focus. Come on. Why are we out of focus? That's better. I'm so close, though. I don't want to be that close. Who you think you are is all a story that you've told yourself and edited and changed and adjusted, and occasionally something disruptive happens in your life that forces you to kind of adjust your story. And then that kind of interacts with the ideas that you have about other people and their stories. And that kind of goes back and forth. But also your theory of what the world is also a story. And that one has mostly been taught to you by your parents, perhaps your religion, definitely your school, definitely physics, the idea of the natural world and outer space and photosynthesis and gravity and electromagnetism. Again, I'm not saying that these things aren't real, but at their core, they are descriptions of something that must be described to be understood, at least in this way. So you have these things that pop up online every once in a while, like flat Earth theory, which is crazy, right? That people could think that the world is flat after everything we know, after satellites and airplanes and geometry and everything we know about outer space through telescopes and the Doppler effect and gravitational fields and black holes. How could they still believe the world is flat? Well, all of that is a story. Again, I'm not saying it's not true. I'm saying that it is an account that has been offered up to you. And the proof of its truth would be the technologies that work for us. But if you think about it in not a complex way, but in a very simple way, your experience of the world is that it's flat. You will never experience in your life the curvature of the earth. And so, even if it is spherical, which I will disclose to you right now, I believe in spherical earth. But that's not the point. The point is that it might actually make more sense for a human being to think of the world as flat, because it is for us. When I have to go to work in a little bit. No, I shouldn't say that because I'm teaching a course. I am at work. I have to go to the faculty place in a little bit. I'm going to go 15 minutes down the road. I'm going east. I'm not going down, right? So again, I'm not trying to in any way tell you that what you think about reality is wrong, but I'm pointing out to you that it is in fact a series of stories, of little nested stories into one big story of what reality is and who you are in that reality. And the thing about narratives is you can think of them like a book. A book is a narrative, it's a story. But the human mind is capable of reading many books. So in the case of flat Earth, you can imagine that in the past, the deep past, many people went through their entire lives thinking that the Earth was flat, without ever even considering the possibility that it could be anything other than flat. And so the mind is capable of coming to an understanding of the world in all kinds of different ways, and using that understanding to weave together a story that ultimately is a kind of ontology, an idea about what all of this is. What is reality? There's a difference between what you, without getting rid of the beliefs that you have about reality, it is possible to imagine a very different world in which things are very different and you believe different things. And so a lot of what we're going to do in this course is treat a number of different theories about reality as if they were different books on a bookshelf. And we're going to kind of, in a way, dive into different worlds through ontology, through philosophy, through different understandings of what the capital T truth is and what it could ultimately be pointing to. And you can think of all of these different hypotheses I just laid out to you, the crazy science fiction accounts of what aliens might possibly be, as different books, different narratives, different accounts of coming to terms with this strange and almost unbelievable fact of aliens. Because it turns out, well, maybe you think that all of it is made up, that all of the different encounters that people have had are either fake or a coordinated government deception or just a kind of series of hallucinations that people have had and didn't know what to do with, so they told these crazy stories and then it got out of control. And I would say that if you think that that is the case, you may be right about that. But even that is very strange. You know, whether you believe all of these encounters are, real. Well, because what most people do with the subject of aliens is they just, that's a thing over there for crazy people to deal with and write books about and deal with on their own time. But I don't have time for that. So you kind of avert your eyes because you don't know what to do with it. You don't know what to do with the anomalous phenomena that don't fit into your models of what reality is. And that's fine. We all have to do that in our lives to some extent. But if you think they're real, if you read through the accounts and you think, wow, something's really going on here, well, that kind of blows your concept of reality out. That kind of has to change your ontology in a fundamental way. And that can be very challenging. But even if you think it's all a concoction or a hallucination or some combination of the two, then somehow that's even stranger. Because why? What level of deception is this? What level of hallucination is this? And how is it possible that people could be hallucinating this with or without coordinating it with the same kind of patterns appearing over and over again? And could this hallucination, could this fake thing happen to me? Or if it's all coordinated, then who's coordinating it? Who would do such a thing? How could they do such a thing, and why? So whatever you decide is the truth about aliens, it points towards something which is this ontological provocation, that reality is a little bit different than what you thought it was, and there's no way around it. And that's what we're going to be exploring. I gave you the homework already, right? You're going to kind of forget the essay. Just do the practice. If you don't believe in God, play pretend, you know, do the thing, call it what you want, meditation or prayer. Sit down, close your eyes, and stop thinking thoughts and just imagine what it would be like for God to be not only true in a conceptual way, but to be present with you. And if you do believe in God, do the opposite. And then notice how that exercise, how it changes you. And maybe those changes will be in the moment. Maybe you'll notice changes then, or maybe you'll notice changes later. Maybe you won't notice any changes at all in the first week of doing this. But if you kind of sit down and close your eyes, and you're probably used to thinking at 1,000 miles per hour, so that's fine. That's going to keep going. You're going to keep thinking, but you're not focusing on the thoughts. You're not looking at them. You're kind of just letting them go by in the way that they're going to go by. You can try to stop them if you want. That might work and it might not. But just notice what persists. What is it that you are experiencing besides the thoughts? Because that's where ontology is. Or ontology is the study of what that is. What is your experience of reality, not thoughts, but reality of like sensing things with all of your senses? What is that, and how is it affected by the idea that God is real or God is not real? How does it change the core experience of your reality? So you're just shifting frames. You're from whatever belief system you have. I'm not challenging your beliefs. Well, I am in a way, but I'm not. My goal is not to get you to change your beliefs. My goal is to get you to practice taking up the beliefs of others. Practice kind of sitting with that ontological provocation and just withstanding it. Like having a wave come over you. Maybe that doesn't make sense at all. And for the purpose of this first week, if you're doing the homework, which you have to do the homework, you're either doing what I tell you to do, or you're dropping the class. And if you drop the class, you get an A. So no hard feelings at all. But if you're going to continue with the class, you need to do these exercises. They might seem silly. They might not make sense to you right now, and they might not even make sense to you as you're doing them throughout the week. But the thing about ontology that we're going to be exploring is that it is a kind of contact point between the world of concepts and philosophy and what that thing that ontology is studying, which is being. Okay, and this might seem very abstract for now, but sometimes the things that are most abstract are also the most fundamental. So they're subtle a little bit, but do the homework or drop the class, because we've only just barely scratched the surface today. And if so, thinking about these different theories of what aliens might be, or what the deception, the idea of aliens might represent, if just thinking about those things is if it's not disturbing to you, then you're not doing it. You're not really interfacing. You're just reading the words. And so as we proceed further into this class, it's going to become more disturbing in a way. And again, by the time we finish this 7-week course, we are going to land the plane somewhere where we can be, I don't want to say comfortable, that might be overselling it a little bit, but my goal in this class is not to leave you in the way that Jimmy Carter was left, but there is choppy waters ahead, and hundreds, thousands, tens of thousands of people have dipped their toes in only to be swallowed up by the theoretical possibilities of discovering the truth. Do you have any questions? Yeah. Yeah. So the question was about this gentleman is religious and wants to know if we're getting into the territory of trying to prove or disprove religions. And that's a good question. I think no, actually. The funny thing is, and it's going to be hard for me to lay this out right now at lecture 1 because we have a lot of ground to cover. But I would not be teaching this course to pull the rug out from under you or to try to take your belief system away from you. But like I said, it's a good question because what we are doing is playing with, looking at, reflecting on, provoking the theories of reality that we hold true. So I would be lying to you if I said what I kind of want to say right now, which is that no, this has nothing to do with that. Don't worry about that. We'll be fine. This is questioning these aspects of reality is dangerous and it will change you. But I can just tell you what my experience has been. But actually, also, last time I taught this course, a number of students came up to me afterwards, and I wasn't expecting this, but they said that by learning about all these things, it at first shattered kind of their concept of being, but then also ultimately drove them into a deeper understanding of the very religious convictions that they held before. And so that might seem like a kind of a paradox to you right now, which is why I didn't want to talk about that in the first lecture, but it's a good question, and you're right. It's appropriate to talk about it now. And yeah, we're gonna get into more of that kind of question in the second lecture and throughout the course. But suffice to say for now, I'm not trying to take what you believe away from you and replace it with what I believe. So I don't want you to take your old beliefs and get rid of them. That's not what this is. That's not what aliens are. It's about coming into an understanding of reality that is maybe just a little bit bigger. And so maybe it reframes or deepens the beliefs that you already have. And it is true that quite a few people have changed their belief systems as a result of this material. A lot of people have, in all kinds of different directions, funnily enough. But no, I'm not doing that. And to answer that question would kind of require the entire course. So I hope that you stay with us, but you get an A if you decide to drop. Anything else? What does that answer your question? Okay.